Welcome back. In this chapter, we will cover the second portion of the pipeline, which involves UV mapping. Now, most 3D artists don't like doing this process, but it is a necessity in order to get textures and decals to appear in your models. For those of you who don't know what UV mapping is taking parts of your 3D model and converting it into a 2D texture, such as used in programs like Substance Painter. Here in Modo, I'm using a feature called the UV cut map, which is a great lifesaver for working on complex models, such as a lantern. Here, what it does is saves all the edges you selected for later editing. So for this particular project, and yes, I will try to keep this as painless as possible for you. For this particular project, I added some technical constraints to the project. Two of those constraints are: one, I'll use one material, and the second constraint is the entire model will fit in the UV space. Now, the polygon count here in this case is irrelevant, but if I were doing this in an actual game environment, actual game production, I would try my best to make sure the model's polygon count was low as possible. So here I am now using the UV cut map on the rods, which I could have done in the previous chapter, where we took one rod and then we ran the radial function on it. But I wanted to have each piece as its own unique UVs in the map, which is fine here for a showpiece. But this for actual game, I would take two of those rods, map them, and then have them cloned, which saves UV space. Now here you go again on the top collar of the lantern, and you're probably noticing you see a checkerboard pattern on the model. And this checkerboard pattern helps us in two ways. It allows you to see distortion on your model. It also allows me to see how much textile density I have at the current time. Now, textile density in game development it's basically, how can I put this? You basically want your details to be congruent, and textile density does that. Though in some instances, you could have an object in the UV map that's bigger than the rest of it. If I wanted more detail on the lantern, I could have used UDIM tiles, but unfortunately Unity doesn't support that right now. So, using one UV map for this project is sufficient. I could also use multiple materials, but again, I want to say performance. Now here's the reason I use the UV cut maps. For a mesh like this one here, the lantern's windshield, the soft contours of those holes would have made it harder to unwrap it all. But I took my time and picked all the edges, and then picked the polygons to create the edges needed. Now sure, this is a time lapse, but actual timing for this unwrapping process took about an hour or some change. Going around picking all the edges and defining their seams. Now, for those of you who have programs like Maya or Blender, or even Modo, there's a feature in the software programs called shortest path selection. And what that does, it saves you so much pain for picking each edge individually. You pick one edge to start, and they pick the edge at the end, and then the program will interpolate between the selections. So, example, straight line. Pick a start, pick the end, and then it'll do the rest for you. I mean, that saves so much time. And you're probably asking yourself, why am I wrapping it this way? There's so many different pieces. Well, the first reason is, it saves on UV space, and it also, in a way, keeps distortion to a minimum. Now, in some of my other projects involving human characters, I've actually found out that I could use a lot more UV space on characters' heads. Versus doing one piece, I can wrap the character's head in multiple shells, and there's two things. It'll use more UV space, it allows more even textile density. And actually the third step as well is there's no distortion. And there's our lifesaver. And speaking of distortion right now, if you're seeing the UV editor, you see some blues and reds in there. And that indicates two problems right there. There's some distortion on the model, and also the textile density is not even. So to fix that, I'd run the relax function in Modo. Now it's a little slow here because I use a lot of iterations, but other than that though, it's usually pretty quick. Here we go, and I saw some polygons there got stuck. I might have missed some edges, but I'm going back to fix all this right now by picking the shells and using the tear off function. And what that does too is another magic feature in the UV editor is if I hit select all edge seams, it'll pick every edge that's not part of anything. And then I gotta append that to the cut map. Yeah, that was pretty good. And I can go ahead and I'm going in now, do a little more cleanup work. You may see, guys, it is a long process, but I did promise you that I'll try to keep it painless, keep it very painless. And also to Modo as well, if you use there's a feature here called rectangle mapping. It takes your any polygons that are straight and makes them rectangular. This is great for adding deep repeating patterns that are harder to do. It was all bent into a cylinder. And here again with the shroud, with the top of that lantern. And this one here too was kind of a challenge to unwrap and get cleaned. Mimics all the angles and the little holes in it. Oh, you probably noticed well, I kept the polygons inside of that lantern cap. Mainly because if I would delete those, there'd be nothing there. No polygons would be drawn. In a game engine, that's called backface culling, and the engine can be set to draw only faces it sees. So anything behind the faces is automatically visible. And I'll tell you though that UV cut map feature is very useful. It's a lifesaver, and I couldn't work without it. Just going through now and picking all the little polygons for the holes there. But yeah, despite my reservations about UV mapping, this is pretty enjoyable. You know, you can take your time, you can zen out a little bit and get the mapping done. And yes, it has to be done, so you kind of go through and just do it. So let's go through real quick and look at the anything may have missed, and picking the edges to allow better unwrapping. And there you have it. Here is the final UV layout for the lantern. And I must say it looks very clean, even textile density, and most importantly, the boring part is over. If you made it this far, I'm proud of you. UV mapping is a very arduous but necessary task. In the next chapter, we will dive right into texturing using Substance Painter. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, leave a comment, share, and subscribe to my channel for more future content like this one. So until next time, take care of yourselves, and God bless. And see you in the next chapter